This billionaire CEO fell in love with his own maid. But what happened will surprise you. Choi Min-joon was the epitome of modern corporate success. At 32 years old, he had already transformed the conglomerate left by his parents into a global empire spanning from technology to entertainment industries. His name was synonymous with power and influence, but also with a relentless reputation. Min-joon was known for his calculating coldness, a trait many attributed to the rigorous upbringing he had received since childhood. He had learned early on that, in the business world, feelings were luxuries few could afford. His ambition knew no bounds, and he expected the same level of perfection from everyone around him. Any failure, no matter how minor, was treated with a severity that intimidated even the most experienced executives. Behind this impeccable facade, however, hid a deeply lonely man. The premature death of his parents in a plane accident when he was only 25 threw him into a whirlwind of responsibilities too soon. With no one to guide him emotionally, Min-joon channeled all his pain into work, building an empire that, while impressing the outside world, never filled the void within him. He lived surrounded by luxury, opulent mansions, exotic cars, custom-made clothes, and a social agenda full of exclusive events. Yet, these material achievements meant little to him when the lights went out and he was alone in his vast property. The absence of genuine connections weighed on him like a constant shadow, something he tried to ignore by diving even deeper into his professional obligations. Min-joon was a man of meticulous routines. Every minute of his day was planned with military precision, from morning meetings to strategic dinners with business partners. He had an entire team dedicated to ensuring everything went as planned, but this obsession with control was not just about efficiency. It was a way to keep loneliness at bay. He avoided meaningful personal relationships, fearing any emotional bond might distract him from his goals or expose him to vulnerabilities. Even amidst constant praise from colleagues and subordinates, Min-joon felt isolated, as if trapped in a gilded cage of his own making. Yoon So-hee, on the other hand, represented everything Min-joon was not. At 24 years old, she came from a modest family that struggled daily to survive. The daughter of a fisherman and a seamstress, So-hee grew up in a small coastal town where livelihoods were uncertain and opportunities scarce. From an early age, she learned to be resilient, facing difficulties with an inner strength that surprised those who knew her. Despite adversities, So-hee never allowed life's hardships to erase her natural kindness. She possessed a unique ability to see the good in people, even in the most difficult ones. This quality made her win the trust and affection of everyone around her, regardless of status or social position. So-hee dreamed of studying medicine, an ambition born from her own experience of seeing her mother fall gravely ill and not having access to adequate medical care. This pivotal episode in her youth awakened in her the desire to help other families avoid the suffering she had witnessed. To achieve this goal, she worked tirelessly as a housemaid in the Choi mansion, saving every penny possible to fund her future studies. Although her role was considered inferior by society, So-hee performed her duties with dedication and pride, believing that any honest work deserved respect. Her warm smile and willingness to help others made her beloved among the household staff, who often sought her advice or simply her company during breaks. The difference between Min-joon and So-hee went beyond their origins and circumstances. While Min-joon was shaped by the weight of expectations and the relentless pursuit of control, So-hee found beauty in simplicity and the authenticity of human relationships. She saw value in the small things: a shared cup of hot tea with a tired colleague, a sincere conversation with someone who needed to vent, or even the quiet tranquility of a rainy day. These fundamental differences created a striking contrast between them, but also planted the seeds for an unexpected connection that would change their lives forever. Despite their seemingly opposite trajectories, both carried emotional scars that shaped who they were. Min-joon, with his armor of indifference, secretly yearned for someone who could penetrate his defenses and offer something real. So-hee, on the other hand, harbored within herself an unwavering hope that the world could be better, even if it meant starting with the people around her. These nuances in their personalities made them complex and multifaceted characters, whose interactions promised to reveal layers of emotion and vulnerability neither had ever experienced. The dynamic between Choi Min-jun and Yoon So-hee was, therefore, much more than a simple collision of different worlds. It was the story of two lost souls, each in their own way, who were about to discover that sometimes the most unlikely connections are the ones that save us. Choi Min-jun's loneliness was a constant presence in his life, as palpable as the Persian carpets that adorned the halls of his mansion. Since the death of his parents, he had assumed the role of patriarch of the Choi family, a responsibility thrust upon him without warning. The emotional impact of this event was devastating. At the time, Min-jun was still too young to fully process the loss, but old enough to understand that his life would never be the same again. He began to view the world through a pragmatic lens, where feelings were replaced by strategic decisions and emotions sacrificed in the name of efficiency. His childhood was marked by strict discipline. Min-jun's parents, though loving, had high expectations for their only child. They prepared him from an early age to lead the family conglomerate, teaching him that success was measured by tangible results. When they passed away suddenly, Min-jun felt betrayed, not just by their deaths, but by the sense that all their efforts to mold him had been in vain. He vowed to himself that he would never depend on anyone again. This unconscious decision led him to build invisible walls around himself, protecting him from new losses but also isolating him from any possibility of genuine connection. The empire Min-jun built was a reflection of his mindset. He expanded the family business into new global markets, acquired competing companies, and consolidated his position as one of the most powerful men in the country. However, each corporate victory seemed only to amplify the hollow echo of his existence. He spent hours in his private office, surrounded by screens displaying charts and reports, but they couldn't fill the silence that inhabited his mind. The elegant parties and charity events he attended were mere formalities, where he greeted familiar faces with a mechanical smile, knowing none of them truly understood him. Even in his personal life, Min-jun kept his distance. He avoided serious relationships, preferring brief, superficial encounters that required no emotional commitment. Close friends were rare. Most people orbiting his life did so out of interest or superficial admiration. He knew this and, paradoxically, accepted it as part of the price of being who he was. Still, there were moments, usually in the dead of night, when the house was completely silent, when he caught himself wondering what he might be missing. He looked at old photos of his parents, remembering shared laughter and calm conversations, and felt a pang of nostalgia for something he couldn't quite name. This emotional gap was something Min-jun tried to compensate for with work. He dove into ambitious projects, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and supervised minute details of his operations. But no matter how hard he tried, the emptiness persisted. He began to realize that behind his confident and controlling demeanor, there was a man who longed for something deeper, something money and power couldn't buy. It was an uncomfortable, almost frightening feeling because it challenged everything he believed to be true about himself. Yoon So-hee, on the other hand, was the opposite of Min-jun in almost every aspect. Her life was marked by sacrifices and overcoming challenges, but she never allowed difficulties to define her. Growing up in a small coastal town, So-hee learned early on the importance of hard work and gratitude. Her father, a middle-aged fisherman, went out to sea before dawn every day, braving adverse conditions to provide for the family. Her mother, a skilled seamstress, spent hours hunched over noisy machines, tailoring clothes for clients who often paid late or didn't show up at all. Despite these struggles, So-hee's parents always found ways to convey optimism to their daughter. They encouraged her to dream big, telling her that with determination she could achieve anything. It was during So-hee's teenage years that her life took a difficult turn. Her mother fell gravely ill, suffering from a heart condition that required specialized treatment. Unfortunately, the family didn't have the resources to cover the medical costs, and So-hee watched her mother gradually weaken while waiting in the public healthcare queue. This period was agonizing but also transformative. It was then that So-hee decided she would do whatever it took to become a doctor. She wanted to be able to help people like her mother, ensuring that no one else would have to suffer due to a lack of proper care. To finance her studies, So-hee began working as a housemaid as soon as she finished high school. She left her hometown and moved to the capital, where she got a job at the Choi Mansion. Though the work was exhausting and poorly paid, So-hee performed her duties with absolute dedication. She cleaned, cooked, and organized the house with a sense of purpose that inspired respect. Her colleagues soon noticed that there was something special about her, a combination of humility, patience, and strength that transcended her social position. In addition to her daily responsibilities, So-hee found time to study. She carried textbooks with her and took advantage of any free moment to review content. At night, after a long day of work, she sat on her small bed in the staff quarters and immersed herself in textbooks and exercises. There were moments when physical and emotional exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, but she always found the strength to continue. Her motivation came from a mix of gratitude and determination. She knew that every hour invested in her studies was a step toward the future she so desired. So-hee also had a special talent for connecting with people. She listened attentively to others' problems, offering words of comfort or practical advice. Among the mansion staff, she was seen as a maternal figure, someone who was always willing to help. Even those who initially judged her based on her social position ended up being won over by her genuine kindness. So-hee didn't seek approval. She simply believed that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they were. Though her life was full of challenges, So-hee never lost faith in the future. She viewed each obstacle as an opportunity for growth, a lesson that brought her closer to her dreams. Her resilience was contagious, and those who interacted with her often felt inspired to face their own difficulties with more courage. Above all, So-hee was a woman with a big heart and an indomitable spirit, qualities that made her unique and irresistible. When Choi Min-joon and Yoon So-hee finally crossed paths, it was as if parallel universes collided. They were polar opposites in practically every aspect: origin, status, outlook on life. But there was something inexplicable that drew them to each other. At first, this attraction was subtle, almost imperceptible. To Min-joon, he was a discreet presence that occasionally caught his attention due to her efficiency and calm demeanor. He noticed how she moved through the mansion's corridors with a silent grace, as if carrying an aura of tranquility that contrasted with the usual chaos of his routine. For So-hee, Min-joon was a distant figure, someone whose imposing presence inspired respect but also a certain caution. Their first significant interaction occurred in a mundane moment, yet charged with symbolism. So-hee was serving coffee at an important meeting when, distracted by a comment from one of the assistants, she tripped and dropped the tray directly onto Min-joon's expensive Italian suit. The incident could have been disastrous. After all, Min-joon was known for his impatience with mistakes. However, instead of exploding in anger, he simply looked at her with an intrigued expression. So-hee, on the other hand, froze, expecting the worst. When he finally spoke, his voice was surprisingly calm. "Don't worry." Those three simple words echoed in So-hee's mind like thunder. She timidly raised her eyes, meeting his for a fraction of a second before lowering her head again, still astonished by his unusual reaction. For Min-joon, that incident sparked something he couldn't explain. Over the years, he had trained himself to maintain emotional distance from everything and everyone, building invisible walls around himself to protect against vulnerability. However, in that brief moment, he noticed something different in So-hee. It wasn't just the way she apologized sincerely or how she tried to fix the mess without hesitation. It was something deeper, something that went beyond appearances. He noticed the delicacy in her gestures, the genuineness in her posture, and it intrigued him in a way he hadn't expected. So-hee, on the other hand, felt both confused and relieved. She had expected to be reprimanded or, at the very least, ignored after the incident. But Min-joon's reaction was completely opposite to what she imagined. That brief exchange left her disconcerted, as if there was an invisible connection between them that neither fully understood. She continued cleaning up, trying to push away the thoughts beginning to form in her mind. After all, he was the boss and she was just a housemaid. Any idea of closeness between them seemed absurd, almost impossible. In the days that followed, Min-jun began observing So-hee more frequently. He noticed small details he had previously overlooked. The way she arranged flowers in the vases in the living room, how she hummed softly while working, or how she treated the other staff with genuine respect. These characteristics fascinated him because they were so different from anything he was used to seeing in his restricted circle. In So-hee, he found something he couldn't explain, an authenticity that seemed to shine even amidst the shadows of her subordinate position. For So-hee, Min-jun was an enigmatic figure. She knew little about him beyond what she heard from the other staff, who described him as cold and inaccessible. However, she sensed something different in him. There were moments when he seemed lost in thought, staring out the window of his office with a melancholic expression. These glimpses of vulnerability touched her deeply, evoking empathy rather than fear. She didn't understand why she felt this connection, but she knew it was real. Over time, their interactions became more frequent, though still subtle. Min-jun began finding excuses to talk to So-hee, asking about trivial matters or requesting help with small tasks. So-hee, for her part, tried to keep her distance, fearing that any closeness might put her job at risk. Nevertheless, it was impossible to ignore the growing tension between them. It was as if they were both caught in a delicate dance, hesitating between moving forward and pulling back. This first encounter, though seemingly trivial, planted the seeds of something much greater. For Min-jun, So-hee represented a chance to escape the prison of control and perfection he had created for himself. For So-hee, Min-jun was a reminder that even in the highest positions, people can still carry invisible wounds. Together, they were about to embark on a journey that would challenge everything they knew about themselves and the world around them. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside that luxurious mansion, something had changed. A fragile yet significant bond was beginning to form between two souls who, at first glance, seemed to belong to completely different worlds. After the coffee incident, So-hee decided to take a defensive stance toward Choi Min-jun. She knew that any prolonged interaction with him could be misinterpreted, especially considering the vast difference in status between them. Even though Min-jun's initial reaction had been surprisingly calm, she couldn't shake off the fear that this might just be a temporary truce. In her mind, it was inevitable that he could change his mind and decide to punish her later. Or worse, fire her without warning. For So-hee, losing that job would be devastating. Not only would it mean giving up the financial security that supported her dream of studying medicine, but it would also represent a severe blow to her self-esteem. Thus, she did everything possible to avoid crossing his path whenever she could. So-hee adjusted her routine to minimize any direct contact with Min-jun. During corporate meetings, she served drinks quickly and left the room before anyone could notice her. In the mansion's hallways, she lowered her eyes and quickened her pace when she saw his imposing figure approaching. Her colleagues noticed this subtle shift in her behavior, but no one commented. After all, everyone was well aware of the boss's rigidity and understood So-hee's caution. However, while she tried to keep her distance, something unexpected began to happen. Min-jun seemed to be paying more attention to her presence. Min-jun wasn't the kind of man who missed details. He had a trained eye for observing people, identifying their weaknesses and strengths with surgical precision, a skill that had been useful throughout his business career. But with So-hee, there was something different. He started noticing small things he had completely overlooked before. How she greeted other employees with a genuine smile, even after exhausting hours of work. How she meticulously organized the house's spaces, ensuring everything was perfect without ever seeking recognition. And how she treated even the most demanding visitors with patience and courtesy. These seemingly simple gestures deeply impressed Min-jun because they were so far removed from the superficial and calculating world in which he lived. At first, he tried to rationalize these observations. Perhaps it was just professional curiosity, he thought to himself. After all, So-hee was efficient at her job, and that naturally drew his attention. But the more he observed her, the more he realized there was something deeper behind it. It was as if she carried with her a lightness he had never experienced, a quality almost magical enough to illuminate even the darkest corners of that luxurious mansion. And although he tried to resist, this feeling grew within him, becoming impossible to ignore. As Min-jun began paying more attention to So-hee, rumors among the staff started to circulate. In the Choi mansion, where secrets and speculations were common currency, it didn't take long for the subtle changes in the boss's behavior to be noticed. Some employees commented on how he seemed less irritated lately, while others mentioned that he was often distracted during important meetings. But it was the realization that Min-jun seemed to be seeking out So-hee that really caused a stir. The rumors started timidly but soon gained momentum. A house assistant mentioned seeing Min-jun asking So-hee about the arrangement of flowers in the living room, something he had never done before. A cook claimed he indirectly praised the tea she prepared, something rare coming from someone so critical. Another employee swore they noticed a lingering look from Min-jun toward So-hee as she set the table for a formal dinner. Each isolated comment seemed insignificant, but together they formed an intriguing and potentially explosive narrative. Among the staff, opinions were divided. Some saw it as absurd, arguing that it was impossible for someone like Min-jun, a man of high status whose life revolved around control and hierarchy, to be interested in a mere housemaid. Others, however, speculated that perhaps something more was going on. "He's human after all," said a cleaner in a conspiratorial tone during lunch break. "Who knows? Maybe she touched something in him that no one else could." These conversations were whispered in the corners of the kitchen or in the staff quarters, always accompanied by nervous laughter and furtive glances. For So-hee, the rumors were uncomfortable. She was already tense due to her own determination to avoid Min-jun, and now she felt even more pressured by the possibility that others might misinterpret their interactions. She knew that regardless of her intentions, any hint of closeness between her and the boss could put her in a vulnerable position. The employees, though sympathetic to her, were also human, and many wouldn't hesitate to use information against her if they thought it would benefit their own positions. Additionally, there was the constant fear that Min-jun's mother, an extremely traditional and strict woman, might find out something and take drastic measures. This silent tension between So-hee and Min-jun created an atmosphere of uncertainty in the mansion. While she continued to carry out her tasks with dedication, trying to remain invisible, he found subtle ways to approach her. Once, he asked her to bring some documents to his office, claiming he needed help organizing them. On another occasion, he casually asked about the book she read during breaks, a detail she hadn't even realized he'd noticed. Each interaction, no matter how small, left So-hee torn between gratitude and apprehension. On one hand, she admired the unexpected kindness he showed. On the other, she feared that these moments might be misinterpreted and lead to serious consequences. Min-jun, for his part, faced equally intense internal conflicts. He knew that his growing attention toward So-hee was unusual, to say the least. He had always prided himself on his ability to separate emotions from practical decisions, but now he found himself questioning that skill. There was something about her that constantly challenged him, something that went beyond her physical beauty or her competence at work. It was the way she seemed to view the world with a purity he thought was lost, as if she carried with her a hope he couldn't reach. This feeling was both fascinating and frightening because it threatened to dismantle years of emotional self-discipline. Deep down, both of them knew they were entering dangerous territory. For So-hee, the line between respect and intimacy was thin, and any misstep could cost her everything. For Min-jun, the risk was even greater. He was flirting with the idea of breaking down barriers he had built over decades, putting not only his reputation but also his identity as an unshakable leader into question. Still, neither of them could stop. It was as if an invisible force was pushing them toward each other, regardless of the consequences. This period of initial conflicts marked the beginning of a silent transformation for both So-hee and Min-jun. Though still bound by social conventions and external expectations, something inside them was starting to change. Fear and curiosity, caution and attraction, all these contradictory emotions converged toward a single point: the inevitability that sooner or later they would have to confront what was growing between them. As the days passed, Choi Min-jun began to seek ways to interact with Yoon So-hee more deliberately. Although he tried to disguise his intentions, it was evident that he was interested in creating opportunities to see her, even if they were brief and seemingly casual. He started noticing details about her that had previously escaped him entirely, like the way she arranged flowers in the vases in the living room or how she organized books on the shelves in his private office when he wasn't present. These small gestures, so simple and everyday, seemed to carry a delicacy that Min-jun found deeply captivating. Driven by this growing curiosity, he began inventing excuses to call So-hee. Once, he asked for her help to solve a problem with the TV remote in his office, something anyone could have fixed in seconds. On another occasion, he questioned her about the best place to hang a newly acquired painting in the living room, as if her opinion were crucial to the final decision. For So-hee, these moments were unsettling. She knew that Min-jun was an extremely capable and independent man, so those requests seemed strange, almost out of context. Nevertheless, she couldn't deny that there was something genuine in the way he treated her during these interactions, something that went beyond mere functional interest. But while Min-jun sought to get closer, So-hee did everything possible to maintain her distance. She interpreted his actions as some kind of game, perhaps an unintentional joke or even a subtle way of testing her. Her rational mind told her it was impossible for someone like Min-jun, a billionaire surrounded by luxury and power, to truly be interested in her. She was just a housemaid, someone whose role in that mansion was clearly defined and limited. Any idea of closeness between them seemed absurd, almost unreal. Thus, So-hee continued to perform her duties efficiently, responding to his questions with courtesy, but always maintaining an invisible barrier between them. The tension between them reached a new level during a gala party held at the mansion. The event was one of the most important occasions on the Choi family's social calendar, attended by influential guests from all over the country. The house was impeccably decorated, and the staff had been instructed to wear specially designed uniforms for the occasion. Elegant, discreet, but still marking their subordinate position. So-hee felt uncomfortable wearing that refined outfit, which contrasted drastically with her usual clothes. She wasn't used to being observed in that way, and the weight of the guests' gazes only increased her sense of inadequacy. However, it was impossible for Min-jun to overlook So-hee's transformation that night. As she moved through the halls serving champagne and canapés, he noticed something he had never seen before. Her natural beauty, enhanced by the simplicity of the uniform, stood out uniquely among the guests. It wasn't just her physical appearance. It was the way she moved with grace and confidence, even in an intimidating environment. Her gestures were smooth, her eyes conveyed calm, and there was a silent dignity in her posture that caught the attention of everyone around, including Min-jun himself. Unable to resist his curiosity, he decided to approach her during a break in the service. When So-hee discreetly stepped out to the garden at the back of the property, probably in search of fresh air after hours of continuous work, Min-jun followed her. The garden was illuminated by soft lights, creating an intimate and tranquil atmosphere. The leaves of the trees swayed gently in the wind, and the distant sound of music from inside the mansion seemed like a faint echo. As Min-jun approached, he was surprised but tried to maintain her composure. "You look tired," he said, his voice low and unexpectedly gentle. "It's just the work, sir," she replied, avoiding looking directly at him. "I'm fine." Min-jun hesitated for a moment, as if carefully choosing his next words. "You've done an excellent job tonight," he continued. "The guests are impressed." So-hee briefly raised her eyes, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, unsure how to react. There was a brief silence between them, filled only by the sound of cicadas and the rustling of the wind through the trees. Min-jun observed So-hee with an intensity she had never seen before. He seemed to want to say something more, something that went beyond the usual formalities between employer and employee. But So-hee remained cautious, fearing that any wrong word might jeopardize her position. She couldn't understand why he was there, talking to her in such a private moment. It was as if he were trying to cross a barrier she had carefully erected over the weeks. Finally, Min-jun spoke again. his voice carrying an unusual sincerity. "You're different, So-hee. Hey, I'd like to understand you better." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. So-hee felt a lump in her throat, torn between the desire to respond and the fear of exposing herself too much. She lowered her eyes again, unable to meet his gaze. "Sir, I'm just a maid," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "There's not much to understand." Min-jun slightly frowned, as if her words had hurt him in some way. "You underestimate yourself," he retorted, his voice firm. "And I'd like to change that." Before So-hee could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted the moment. One of the assistants appeared, informing Min-jun that he was needed inside the house for a round of speeches. He gave So-hee one last look, as if wanting to say more, but ended up returning to the mansion without adding anything. For So-hee, that brief encounter in the garden was enough to leave her even more confused. She didn't know how to interpret Min-jun's words or the sincere tone in which he had spoken them. All she knew was that the distance she had worked so hard to maintain was becoming increasingly difficult to preserve. And although part of her still feared the implications of any closeness, another part, a part she barely admitted to herself, was beginning to yearn for more of these moments. This gradual approach between the two was like a delicate dance, where each step Min-jun took forward was met with hesitation by So-hee. He advanced, trying to break down the barriers she had built, while she retreated, fearing the consequences of letting him get too close. However, both of them knew that, no matter how hard they tried to resist, something bigger was at stake, something neither of them could fully control. As the relationship between Choi Min-jun and Yoon So-hee began to blossom, external obstacles arose like an inevitable storm, threatening to destroy everything they had built so far. The world around them was not kind to unlikely connections, especially when they involved such glaring differences in social status. For Min-jun, a man accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, these external conflicts represented an unprecedented challenge, something he couldn't simply resolve with money or power. The first major obstacle came from Min-jun's own family. His mother, Choi Eun-ji, was an imposing and authoritarian figure, known for her rigidity and dedication to family traditions. She had always placed great expectations on her son, especially regarding the continuity of the Choi legacy. From an early age, she prepared him to lead the family conglomerate, teaching him that strategic marriages and social alliances were fundamental to maintaining the family's prestige. When Eun-ji discovered evidence of the romance between Min-jun and So-hee, her reaction was immediate and devastating. She summoned Min-jun for a private conversation in her personal office, an austere space decorated with antique furniture and portraits of past generations of the Choi family. Her tone was firm and cutting, making it clear that she would not tolerate any deviation from the norms she considered non-negotiable. "You're playing with fire," she said, her voice laden with disapproval. "That girl is a maid, Min-jun. You're putting everything we've built at risk because of a whim." Min-jun tried to argue, explaining that his feelings for So-hee were genuine and that he saw no reason why their love should be considered improper. But Eun-ji wasn't willing to listen. To her, the relationship was a direct affront to family values and a threat to the future of the conglomerate. She threatened to fire So-hee immediately, ordering Min-jun to cut all ties with her if he wanted to continue being recognized as the legitimate heir to the Choi fortune. The pressure on Min-jun was unbearable. He knew his mother had the power to make her threats a reality, but he also felt that abandoning So-hee would betray something deep within himself. Meanwhile, the scandal began to gain traction outside the mansion walls. A business rival of Min-jun's, someone who had been trying to undermine his position in the market for years, saw the situation as a perfect opportunity to strike. He hired private investigators to spy on Min-jun's personal life, collecting information that could be used against him. Manipulated photos began circulating on social media, showing Min-jun and So-hee in seemingly intimate moments, images that, though fake, were edited convincingly enough to cause damage. The sensationalist media quickly embraced the story, turning it into scandalous headlines. Newspapers and websites published speculative articles with titles like "Billionaire heir involved in forbidden romance with Maid" and "Scandal shakes corporate empire. Cross-class love shocks elite." The news spread like wildfire, generating malicious comments and relentless judgments. Many saw the case as a violation of social norms, while others ridiculed it as an unrealistic romantic fantasy. Min Jun's carefully constructed reputation, built over years, was being dragged through the mud. Inside the mansion, the employees also began to feel the effects of the scandal. Some of So-hee's colleagues treated her with hostility, accusing her of using Min Jun for personal gain. Others expressed pity, believing she was being used as a pawn in a larger game over which she had no control. Regardless of intentions, So-hee felt isolated and overwhelmed. Every suspicious glance, every whispered comment in the hallways, seemed to remind her that she didn't belong in that world, and perhaps never would. For So-hee, the weight of it all was crushing. She had always known that her relationship with Min Jun was complicated, but she never imagined the consequences would be so widespread and destructive. Watching the chaos unfold around them, she began to question whether their love was truly worth it. It was clear that Min Jun was suffering, both from family pressure and public attacks, and So-hee felt guilty for being the cause of it all. She began to believe that her presence in his life was more harmful than beneficial. Determined to protect Min Jun, So-hee made a drastic decision. She wrote a farewell letter, explaining that she needed to step away to preserve his future. In the letter, she expressed her sincere feelings, saying that she loved him deeply but understood that their worlds were incompatible. "I never meant to cause problems for you," she wrote. "But now I see that my presence is only bringing pain. Please forgive me for leaving like this, but it's for the best for both of us." The next day, So-hee formally submitted her resignation to the mansion's administrative team, citing personal reasons for her departure. She planned to return to her hometown, where she could restart her life away from the whirlwind she had inadvertently created. Though her heart was broken, she believed this was the only way to ensure that Min Jun could move forward without being dragged further into the chaos. For Min Jun, So-hee's departure felt like a physical blow. He found the letter hours after she had left, and every word echoed painfully in his mind. He tried calling her repeatedly, but So-hee had turned off her phone and disappeared without a trace. The sense of loss was overwhelming, and he realized that, for the first time in his life, he was facing something his money or power couldn't fix. The external conflicts had achieved exactly what they intended, separating the two. However, while So-hee left believing she was doing the right thing, Min Jun began to realize that he wasn't willing to accept the separation. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, full of resistance and challenges, but he also knew he couldn't simply let So-hee go. For him, this love was more than a whim or fleeting passion. It was something that had profoundly transformed him, something he wasn't willing to abandon. This period of obstacles and external conflicts marked the beginning of a new phase in Min Jun and So-hee's story. Though physically separated, both carried within themselves the certainty that what they had shared was real, and that, no matter how hard the world tried to destroy it, this love remained alive, waiting only for a chance to be reborn. The climax of Choi Min Jun and Yoon So-hee's story arrived at a moment of intense emotional tension, when Min Jun decided to directly confront the forces trying to separate them. He knew that, to have a real chance with So-hee, he needed to face not only his authoritarian mother, but also the relentless judgment of society and the public attacks that had turned his life into chaos. It was a decision that required courage, sacrifice, and unwavering determination, qualities Min Jun discovered within himself as he fought for something he finally considered more important than his corporate empire. The first battle was waged against his mother, Choi Eun-ji. Min Jun requested a formal meeting with her, choosing the same austere room where she had expressed her disapproval weeks earlier. This time, however, he wasn't willing to accept her orders without question. When Eun-ji began repeating her arguments about family traditions and public reputation, Min Jun interrupted her firmly. "Mother, I respect everything you've done for me," he said, his voice calm but charged with conviction. "But this is my life, and I won't allow anyone to tell me who I can or cannot love. Eun-ji was visibly shocked by her son's audacity. She tried to argue, reminding him of the consequences of his choices, but Min-jun was determined. He explained that he wasn't just someone he admired. She represented something greater, an opportunity to live an authentic life, free from the oppressive expectations that had always suffocated him. He admitted that, for the first time, he felt complete by her side, and that giving up this love would be like renouncing an essential part of himself. If this means losing your approval or even my place in the company, then so be it, he declared, ending the conversation with a seriousness that left no room for negotiation. Determined to prove he was willing to give up everything for Min-jun made an even bolder decision. He called a press conference to publicly address his relationship. It was a risky move, especially at a time when sensationalist headlines still dominated social media and tabloids. However, he knew he needed to confront the rumors head-on, taking control of the narrative before it was too late. Facing journalists and cameras, Min-jun spoke with a frankness that surprised everyone. "I know many of you have speculated about my personal life in recent days," he began, his posture impeccable but his tone vulnerable. "I want to clarify that I am completely responsible for the choices I've made. Yes, I am in love with Yoon-so. She is not just a housemaid. She is an extraordinary woman whose kindness, intelligence, and strength inspire everyone around her, including me." He continued by explaining that he saw no reason why love between two people should be judged based on social status or material wealth. "Our relationship is not a scandal or a violation of values," he affirmed. "It's simply proof that the human heart knows no barriers. If this offends some, I'm sorry, but I won't apologize for following what I believe is right." To demonstrate his seriousness, Min-jun announced that he would temporarily step down as president of the family company. He explained that this decision was necessary to focus on rebuilding his personal life and proving that his commitment to Sohee was genuine. "I'm not abandoning my responsibilities," he added, "but I need to show that there are things more important than money or power. I hope that by doing this, we can begin to change the way people view love and human relationships." Min-jun's public statement had an immediate impact. Some critics continued to ridicule him, calling his actions impulsive or irresponsible. However, there were also those who applauded his courage, seeing his decision as a rare example of integrity and authenticity in an often superficial world. The media began portraying him in a new light, highlighting his willingness to prioritize love above all else. Meanwhile, Sohee was in her hometown, trying to rebuild her life away from the whirlwind she had left behind. She followed the news about Min-jun from afar, torn between admiration and concern. Though deeply touched by his words and gestures, she still feared that he was sacrificing too much for her. When Min-jun finally managed to locate her, he traveled there personally, determined to convince her that his love was true and that he was willing to fight for them. Their reunion was charged with emotion. So he tried to argue that he should return to his former life, saying she didn't want to be the cause of so many sacrifices. But Min-jun wouldn't accept her objections. "You've already sacrificed too much for me," he said, holding her hands firmly. "Now it's my turn to fight for us. No matter what happens, I know we're stronger together." Finally convinced by Min-jun's sincerity and determination, so he decided to give their relationship another chance. She realized that despite all the difficulties, the love they shared was real and too valuable to abandon. Together, they began facing the criticism and challenges that still arose along their path. Although prejudice and judgment didn't completely disappear, they learned to handle them with patience and mutual respect. Over time, Min-jun returned to lead his company, but now with a different perspective. He implemented significant changes in corporate culture, promoting equality and inclusion within the organization. Sohee, on the other hand, resumed her plans to study medicine, encouraged by Min-jun to pursue her dreams without fear. They built a future based on partnership and understanding, proving that love can overcome any obstacle when fueled by authenticity and respect. Thus, Choi Min-jun and Yoon-so. He not only overcame the external challenges that tried to separate them but also transformed their lives in profound and meaningful ways. Their story became a testament to the power of true love. A love capable of transcending barriers, challenging conventions, and creating something beautiful out of chaos. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts and subscribe to the channel to receive more videos.